In 1556, the Mughal Empire was on the brink of collapse. Emperor Humayun had died suddenly, leaving behind a shrinking, fractured territory surrounded by hostile kingdoms. The fate of this massive, vulnerable state now rested entirely on the shoulders of his heir, a 13-year-old illiterate boy named Akbar. The external enemies were dangerous, but the immediate threat was inside his own court. Cutthroat factions of nobles and warlords circled this teenager, fully expecting to manipulate him as a puppet or assassinate him and take the throne. Akbar responded to these threats with terrifying, absolute violence. When his own powerful foster brother assassinated a key minister, the young emperor knocked him out and hurled his body over a palace terrace. When the first fall didn't kill him, Akbar had him dragged back up and thrown down a second time. For a boy king surrounded by wolves, this level of brutality was a requirement for survival. Displaying absolute, unquestionable dominance was the only way to shock his fractured court into submission and prevent the total collapse of his dynasty. With his inner circle brought to heel, Akbar turned his war machine outward. He integrated new technologies into his military, Ottoman-style cannons and matchlock firearms, pairing them with massive charges of war elephants to bulldoze through rattle kingdoms. This brutal expansion reached its climax at the siege of Chittorgarh in 1567. The Rajputs, a fiercely independent warrior culture, held this imposing mountain fortress, and Akbar knew that to control the region, he had to break their strongest point of resistance. The siege dragged on for months, and when the Mughal forces finally breached the walls, Akbar made an example of the inhabitants. He ordered the massacre of 30,000 surviving defenders and unarmed civilians, gathering their severed heads to build gruesome mourning towers throughout the region. Despite the destruction of the capital, the Rajput resistance didn't vanish. It simply moved into the hills. Akbar found himself locked in a cycle of expensive, endless skirmishes with a hostile population, a military drain that threatened to exhaust the Mughal treasury as fast as he could fill it. Recognizing that his empire could not survive on terror alone, Akbar executed a strategic pivot. He stopped treating the conquered territories as enemy states to be occupied, and instead built an institutional framework designed to actively win the loyalty of the people he had just defeated. To control his elites, he introduced the mansabdari system. Instead of allowing local warlords to rule inherited fiefdoms based on their bloodlines, Akbar absorbed them into a strict imperial hierarchy. Every military and civil official was assigned a numerical rank, making their status, salary, and troop commands entirely dependent on merit and the emperor's direct favor. To stabilize the rural economy, he implemented the docila system. Instead of unpredictable annual tax collections that often led to local corruption, revenue was now calculated as a fixed third of the average agricultural produce over the previous 10 years, with built-in remissions for failed harvests. These administrative reforms replaced the chaos of violent conquest with predictable, systematic control. Akbar was building the structural scaffolding required to keep a vast, diverse population functioning under a single government. But administration alone wasn't enough to secure loyalty. Akbar began negotiating marriage alliances with the very people he had spent years fighting, the fierce Hindu Rajputs. When Akbar married Rajput princesses, like his chief consort Mariam-uz-Zamani, he broke centuries of precedent. He did not force them to convert to Islam. Instead, he granted them full religious freedom, allowing Hindu worship right inside the imperial harem. This integration extended far beyond the palace walls. Akbar took his new Hindu fathers-in-law and brothers-in-law and elevated them into the highest ranks of his Muslim-dominated court. Soon, Rajput generals were commanding massive Mughal armies and expanding Akbar's borders on his behalf. By seamlessly grafting his most formidable martial rivals onto the Mughal family tree, Akbar neutralized the threat they posed. Marriage and diplomacy accomplished what decades of siege warfare could not. Akbar then extended this policy of inclusion to the common people. He made a massive economic and social concession to the Hindu majority by officially abolishing the jizya, the traditional sectarian tax levied on non-Muslim subjects. At his new capital of Fatehpur Sikri, Akbar established the Ibadat Khana, or House of Worship. He filled the hall with a jarringly diverse assembly of Muslim clerics, Hindu priests, Jain monks, Jesuit missionaries, and Zoroastrians, all invited to debate the nature of God under a single roof. Listening to these distinct viewpoints deeply altered his own life. Influenced by Jain and Hindu arguments, Akbar adopted vegetarianism on certain days of the week, drank water strictly from the Ganges River, and eventually banned the slaughter of cows throughout the empire. He eventually synthesized these ideas into Din-i Ilahi, an ethical code that fused principles from Islam, Hinduism, and other traditions. It promoted virtues like generosity, piety, and abstinence, serving as a unifying ideology designed specifically for his inner circle of courtiers. Akbar's religious tolerance functioned as a precise geopolitical instrument. By removing the primary grievances of the majority, he eliminated the motivation for sectarian revolt and bound a deeply fractured society to his throne. By the time Akbar died in 1605, his dual strategy of calculated force and deep integration had yielded immense dividends. The empire was experiencing an economic boom, and his court had become a flourishing center of Indo-Persian art, literature, and international trade. The numbers tell the story. Over a 50-year reign, he expanded a precarious, shrinking foothold in the north into a unified continental superpower, tripling the empire's size and total wealth. Today, his legacy remains intensely debated. In modern India, Akbar is widely revered as a visionary leader, a pioneering champion of secularism and religious pluralism, whose policies laid the groundwork for a unified, diverse nation. In contrast, historical narratives in modern Pakistan often take a much more critical view. Many criticize him for diluting Orthodox Islam and intentionally blurring distinct religious identities in his pursuit of absolute political control. What remains undeniable is the effectiveness of his rule. Akbar's reign demonstrates that while extreme force can build an empire, enduring power requires the political genius to turn your fiercest enemies into your most loyal allies.